In cities like Melbourne, as we are in here today, we've been developing in a way over the last 30 years or so that has concentrated most new dwellings, and particularly most new affordable dwellings, on the fringes of our cities. This means that people seeking new dwellings, affordable dwellings for them, are in areas that are often away from jobs, away from opportunity, cultural experiences, family and their expressions of community. So the way we are building the city is building in a structural inequality. It's limiting the opportunity of certain areas of our population. Some people talk about this as a housing crisis, a crisis in the provision of houses in cities. I think it's interesting to think about this from an ethical standpoint, because on one level it's not a crisis. We have by and large enough housing for the people coming to cities like Melbourne, but the question is, what is the experience of that housing of people in our city, particularly those who are less advantaged from the point of view of wealth or education? How are they getting access to opportunity by the nature of the housing that we're providing? Its location and its quality. So what might be the solution to this problem? Well, I think one of the really interesting ways to look at this conceptually is through this ethical lens. Because I guess at the moment there's many who would say there isn't a problem. There's enough housing, it's up to the market to decide. But when we take an ethical perspective and ask people to consider, well, what is the experience of people in our cities of housing, and particularly the more disadvantaged in our cities of housing and of the broader city, an ethical perspective might ask us, might ask developers, it might ask planning and policy and government to take a different perspective, to say, well, hang on a minute, is that experience of the city acceptable? Is that what we want of an ethical city? And that opens up, I think, a more proactive and positive discussion around the potential solutions. Many of the potential solutions are well known. First of all, it's about providing well-located affordable housing. And by affordable housing, we're talking about both market-based affordable housing, but also about subsidised housing. And there are a whole range of different models from around the world for good quality mechanisms to deliver subsidised housing to those people who need better access to opportunity. So a big part of that is the policy environment. At the moment in cities like Melbourne, we have significant mechanisms to encourage infill and higher density development, generally in good locations, and that's a good start. But the nature of those dwellings, particularly in terms of their sustainability, which has a big impact on affordability over the life cycle of a home, is certainly up for question. The standards of our development in Australian cities, particularly of apartments, has been pretty low. And where there's been attempts to innovate, particularly at the local government level, to create innovative regulatory and policy mechanisms to try and up the standard of sustainability performance of dwellings, they've generally been squashed or quashed by a state system that prefers to have consistency rather than innovation and flexibility around these issues of dwelling performance. There's also significant potential for market-based solutions. But we also need to recognise that the market doesn't naturally provide solutions in this context. There's often an argument put that the market will follow demand, that if there's an expression of demand, the market will provide. But that's not the case in housing. We don't have a pure market here. We've got modes of development, particularly modes of volume building on the fringe of our cities. They're kind of locked into a current business model, and they're inflexible and don't want to change. So this idea that the development is following the market is flawed, and research shows that there's significant latent demand for a different kind of housing product in our cities, for housing product that is located in central areas, that potentially doesn't require having car access or paying for a car park as part of an apartment, that features sustainable building design and reduces the costs of living in a dwelling. And what we see is that when the few examples of those are released to market, like the Commons in inner city Melbourne, for example, the demand is huge. So these examples need fostering. We need regulatory frameworks that encourage them so that that segment of the market has the ability to buy the kind of dwelling they want, an affordable dwelling over the life of living in that dwelling in well-located areas.